I'm from a little town a couple hours north of Minneapolis, St. Paul. It's called Brainerd, if any of you have ever been to Minnesota. For those of you now, when I was in New Orleans for the first time, I was coming in on a taxi into the city, and I said, "What is this big lake here?" And they said, "Well, that's the Mississippi River." I'm like, "No way." The Mississippi River runs 4 blocks from my house. You could throw a baseball across it where I'm at. So, in fact, I'll show you on the map here as we go. That is the Mississippi River in Brainerd. This is the city of Brainerd right here. This is the city of Baxter. Brainerd's 13,500 people. That's where my family's from. That's where my wife and I met when we were in junior high and dated all through high school. We went off to college, came back. She is a news reporter, and I do this. We both live in a little house here in North Brainerd. This is where I grew up, and my family has been here for over 100 years. I am an engineer and a planner. I'm also very active and involved in the community. I'm one of those people who reads the meeting minutes for the city council meetings. Occasionally we'll turn on the local cable channel and watch them make motions and debate things. I'm that person. So I've read all the plans. I spent 3 years, I just got done last month on the Planning Commission, so I've read all the ordinances. I've been involved in basically what's going on in the city for many, many, many years, professionally and also just as an active citizen. One day I woke up, and on the front page of the paper was an article that down at the legislature, our legislative delegation was asking for money to run sewer and water out to the airport on the far edge of town. It was a huge, huge project, big dollar amount. This was on the front page of the newspaper. And the thing that was puzzling to me is that I had never heard of this project. I've been involved in all this stuff. I've been around the meetings. Something this big, you'd think I would have heard of it. Where did this come from? Where is this idea? $7.1 million. That was the cost of the project. Just to give you, because I know, we're at an age and a time when, $1 billion here, $1 trillion there, we lose track of money. Our entire city budget in a year is $9 million. So in response to in proportion to our budget, this is a huge, massive project. Not one that I had ever heard of before. The way that newspapers work in small towns is that we have what's called a stringer down at the state capitol. So a stringer will report for many, many, many local newspapers, and they will write a brief. Here's what's gone on and how it affects you. And then if it's an important story, the next day the local paper will follow up. Well, this is one of those briefs, and they're like, well, we gotta figure out what's going on here. And so the local newspaper contacted our legislative delegation and said, hey, what's happening? At the time, we were represented in the House by a Democrat, a guy named John Ward. He goes to my church. He's a very nice guy. I know him very well. They asked John, hey, what's going on with this project? We've never heard of this before. And John said, well, let me tell you, I listen to my constituents. This was the quote in the paper. I listen to my constituents, and this is what I was told you want. If this isn't what you want, let me know, and we'll do something different. They then went to the Senate. We were represented in the Senate by a woman named Carrie Root. Carrie is a Republican. She is the mayor of a town just north of Brainerd. I've worked with her when she was mayor. I like her a lot. She's very nice. We get along very well. They asked Carrie the same thing, and she said, you know what? We've got a process down here that we go through. We've got to get bills introduced and get things moving. Let's get this one moving. And if things, don't work out or they change or we decide to change, we can always pull it back. We just can't introduce it later. So let's get this process going and then see where we end up. Okay, that didn't really answer anyone's questions. And so people kept digging, and I was one of them who kept kind of pushing and pushing and pushing and saying, hey, what is going on here? Where did this project come from? After about a week, the city was kind of cajoled into issuing a press release which they did to explain where this came from. The city's press release said, basically, the impetus was a directive that they received from the state fire marshal, who said they had to make some improvements out at the airport before a certain time frame, or they were going to be, in trouble. And so they had, essentially the city, had asked for the money from the legislature to deal with this mandate from the fire marshal. Now, let's pause here for a second, because part of this conversation is explaining how the sausage is made. So let's pause here and understand this, because I've been in many of these meetings and can explain how these things go down kind of intuitively. What happened is the city and the county jointly own the airport property. An series of improvements were made. Basically, we got some money from the federal government to build a conference room, a jet bridge, and a restaurant. Now, I do travel for business, like probably 35 weeks a year out of 52. I never fly out of the Brainerd airport. They have 2 flights a day, one in the very early morning, one late at night. I don't know why you would need a restaurant, but we have one now. We have a really nice glass conference room. And I know why we have a jet bridge, but I have to say, I'm a little bit turned off by it. I always liked landing in February at like 10:30 at night, getting off the plane and going full Minnesota on everybody. And you could pick out really quickly who is not a native and who was. Because the rest of us, we would just walk off the plane like this is like we're home. And everybody else would be, oh my gosh, do people actually live in this place? Because you'd have to walk across the tarmac and all that. It was very, it was very empowering. That's gone now. They took that away from us. But as part of this, the fire marshal now said, you have more space, you have a restaurant, you have to increase your fire protection capacity. I'm burdened with being an engineer, so I know what the fire marshal meant. I actually went and got their report so I could understand it. They meant add a little bit of a larger tank out there to hold some spare water, come up with a different plan for deploying your fire trucks, make sure you got a big enough pumper truck, whatever. The city used this as an opportunity to essentially ask for money from the state. And so now we have, at the state legislature, a request for $7.1 million to do this project. Of course, we all know how those go. Once the request is made, even though it's not been part of a formal plan, a study, there's no real need demonstrated at the local level besides this one, kind of loose connection to the fire marshal. These things start to take on a life of their own. And as I'm going around town talking to people about it, I think what you could call the barbershop talk or the coffee shop talk starts to go in ways that are very predictable. Come on, Chuck, it's going to create jobs. We lead the state in unemployment, Brainerd does generally, and by lead I don't mean best, I mean worst. In the depths of the last recession, if the state unemployment rate was at 7 or 8%, we were at 12, 14%. So we're always a little bit worse than everybody else. They're like, Chuck, you can't oppose this, it's going to create jobs, come on. Chuck, it's not going to cost us anything. If we don't take this money from the state, if the state doesn't give it to us, it's just going to go to someone else. Like, why would we say no to money that the state's going to give us? Think of all the development opportunities. Think of all the land now. We're going to have all this pipe that runs out to the edge of town. Think of all the things we can hook up and connect to and develop. This is going to create great growth potential for us, Chuck. And then, of course, think of the children. The fire marshal is saying we have to do this. Are you going to stand up and tell the fire marshal that we shouldn't do this, that we're not going to do this project? Shame on you, Chuck. Come on, get on board. And so the talk around town starts to kind of morph around this project that nobody has heard of. All of a sudden, there's gaining a little bit of steam and momentum. Like, maybe we'd be open to this. Maybe this is something we should do. Well, the legislature ultimately acts, because that's what they do, right? This is an off-year budget, so they're allocating these big capital projects. They allocate money to the city of Brainerd for this project. Of course, they're smart legislators. They don't give us everything we want. They give us just enough to make it painful, right? So now we have a local match that we have to come up with. It's way more than we ever would have spent on this project if we had come up with this project ourselves. But now we've been awarded this money, and so we have got to make this really tough decision. Do we accept it or not? And by accepting it, we're going to have to come up with 20% ourselves, a big dollar amount we don't have. What happens then? All the local contractors, the engineering firms, the non-governmental organizations, everybody who brushes shoulders with legislators at some times, they come out of the woodwork. They start going to the meetings. They start writing letters to the editor. They start going to the Rotary clubs and talking about this. They say things like, look, our legislative delegation, they're down there fighting for us. They went to work for us. They fought to get us this money. We have to do our share. They got the ball to the 20-yard line. We got to take it over the goal line. And so all of a sudden now, there's all this, professional high-level momentum for the project. This is what we call the project development process. And what we wind up with at the end of the day is a fully funded project. A project that is all ready to go. We've got the conceptual design done. We know where we're going to go, what we're going to do. We've got a dollar amount. We've got it funded, and we're all ready to go. What is the thing that's missing at this point from this public process? Yeah, the public, right? Like all of us. We've not really been, besides the coffee shop talk, we've not really been engaged in this process in any way. Don't worry, there's a way that we take care of that. We have what's called the public hearing process or the public engagement process. We will go out and we will present 3 options to people, right? 3 things for us to consider. Option number 1 is a gold-plated pipe out to the airport that will solve all of our problems forevermore. Option number 2 is to do nothing and to face the wrath of the fire marshal. And option number 3 is this nice moderate option, kind of a compromise between the two. Something that, oh, by the way, is 80% funded by the state government. What do you say, community? And we wonder why people are mad, right? We wonder why people get angry. We wonder why they don't feel represented or respected by these processes. We're spending 80%, we set out to spend 80% of our annual budget on a project that literally 6 months before nobody had heard of. Had not been contemplated, was not a priority, was not something any of us thought really needed to happen. But because of the process that we've set up to deliver this type of project over and over and over, we're now sitting with this sucking all the air out of the room. This is the focus of our staff. This is the focus of our community. This is the focus of our entire conversation. If we want cities to work for us, if we want the community to actually lead where we spend our money, where we spend our effort, where we spend our time, we have to start with this process. And we have to take this process and actually flip it on its head. It needs to begin in some other place. As opposed to beginning at the staff level or even at a high-level council level, instead of being the wishes or the dreams of some insider, we actually need to start our project development process with the needs of people within the community. If you were at my talk that I gave in November when I was here, I talked about a 4-step process that cities use to identify the highest returning investments. Tonight, we're going to put some meat on those bones. That was one slide and one concept, and tonight we're going to talk about that with some greater depth. There is a concept or a saying out of Silicon Valley that we can apply and we need to apply to project development and capital spending within our cities. It goes something like this. Innovation that happens from the top down tends to be orderly but dumb, while innovation that happens from the bottom up tends to be chaotic but smart. If we ask people what they prefer, we will all say we prefer smart to dumb. But if you actually delve into it, we have an overwhelming preference for order over chaos. We will tolerate an amazing amount of dumb so that we never experience disorder. And if you doubt me, think of the last time you sat at a traffic signal at 1 in the morning, right? We will gladly tolerate dumb so that we don't live in a world that has even a tiny bit of chaos. Let me show you what this looks like from a public project standpoint. You all know this city here, right? We're close enough where people know what I'm talking about. Up in Minnesota, everyone's like, where is this? I don't get it. This is Memphis, Tennessee. I happen to really love Memphis. I've been able to spend a lot of time there. They've been generous in inviting me, much as you have, to come and share ideas with them and learn from them, much like I've had the opportunity to do here. It's been a great exchange. And I've learned a lot from Memphis. I really love them. I love the passion they have for their place. But Memphis is plagued by the burden of decades and decades and decades of the big silver bullet project. The big thing that would solve all the problems, the big top-down thing that they could do, that they could get money for, that was going to save them and make them something else. One of them is this right here, the pyramid. Back in the 1980s, the city of Memphis decided that the thing that they needed the most, the thing they needed to spend their energy and effort on, was attracting an NBA team. So what they did is they went out and they built a pyramid-shaped stadium and then went searching for a team to fill it. They ultimately landed a team. I don't know if you have a preferred basketball team here. Is it the Pelicans? Does anyone care about basketball in this state? Not lately, huh? They got the Grizzlies to move to Memphis from anybody? Vancouver. Yep. So Vancouver Grizzlies moved to Memphis, where there are no Grizzlies, but there are now in basketball form. The problem is the Grizzlies didn't like this stadium. And so the city of Memphis wound up building them a new stadium a few blocks from this one. This one sat empty for a long, long time. Let me give you another example from Memphis. This is a little street called Broad Avenue. Yeah.
You might point out what the pyramid is.
Oh, I'm going to get to that.
Okay.
Yeah, it's a little suspense moment here for people who don't know what the pyramid is today. They didn't tear it down. It's a little street called Broad Avenue. Broad Avenue is a former streetcar stop. Back in the day, the streetcar would stop there. People would get off. There was a bunch of commercial businesses, a whole neighborhood around it. In the 1950s, as the city was growing and embracing the next new project, they ripped out the streetcar lines. They ran a highway through the middle of this neighborhood. Without the streetcar, without the foot traffic, this neighborhood just died. These businesses were empty. These buildings were run down, and things did not look good in this neighborhood. Some citizens in this area, fed up with the decline, fed up with the neglect, went out and took matters into their own hands. They worked with the owners of these buildings to get them swept up, swept out, cleaned up. They cleaned up the sidewalks. They took paint from the hardware store and painted their own crosswalks, their own bike lanes. They invited businesses from around the community to come in and open up for a weekend, just as like a street party to kind of demonstrate what could happen if someone actually cared. They had a bike shop, they had an art gallery, they had an ice cream stand. They didn't go get Department of Health inspections, they didn't go get city permission. They just went out and did this. And they said, by the time anybody gets mad and comes to shut us down, we're going to be gone anyway. Let's just go make this as nice as we can with the tools that we have on hand. And that's what they did. Two examples. That pyramid is now today
Bass Pro
the
Shop.
world's biggest Bass Pro Shop.
That's what you see when you go into Memphis.
Yep. In order to make that happen, the city of Memphis and the state of Tennessee had to give Bass Pro Company over $200 million of additional public subsidy beyond what's gone into the building already, the sunk costs. Just because we're among friends here tonight, they had projected, this is very sad, they had projected as part of this redevelopment with the Bass Pro, a certain level of sales tax income that would be generated by this new building. In year one, it was supposed to be this much because year one's so exciting, and then in year two, it would drop off, in year three, drop off, and then it would reach like a status, like a stable point. Year one, their actual revenue was 50% of what they projected. Year two, it fell off to, I think, 25% of what they projected, and it is now stabilized at a much lower base than what they had projected. It's very, very sad. Again, no critique of Memphis as people, but as a process, orderly but dumb. That little block in Broad Avenue, people went out and did this little project. I wasn't there when they did it. They brought me out there 6 months later. When I was out, every storefront was full. Every building was now occupied. There were businesses in there. The second stories were full. It was the little people trying to get a go of it, right? There were no chains. There were no franchises. It was just people from the neighborhood filling this space, making use of it. The city looked at this and said, something special has happened here. And they actually tracked it. What they found, $15 million increase in private investment in this neighborhood after this project. 50% increase in rents, so the landlords were actually, because of the demand, were able to bump up the value of those properties. They have 25 new businesses in there, 25 properties that were renovated, and 17 properties that were formerly labeled blighted that have now been taken off the blighted list. Total public investment here, 0. This is chaotic but smart. Incidentally, when I started the book tour on October 1st, I wanted to start it in Memphis, Tennessee, and that's what we did. My book came out October 1st. October 2nd, I was in Memphis to give a talk. And prior to that talk, we went out and looked at Broad Avenue. Broad Avenue today does not look at all like this. These lanes are all gone. All this stuff is gone. And what's in place for these 2 blocks is permanent concrete. It's now been put in permanently. They essentially think of this as like a test. They tested it. They showed that it created value. It created wealth. It created opportunity. They went in after they did this prototype essentially and said this worked. They put it in permanently. When they put it in permanently, they planted nice trees, put in nice benches, put in nice touches. The businesses along here are amazing. They're growing. They're becoming more successful. And here's the really, really cool part. This is a 2-block stretch. If you go 2 blocks north and 2 blocks south, you know what it looks like? It looks like this. They did it all with paint, temporary. They're trying it out. They're saying, can we get this little love that's going here to spread at very low cost to the rest of this neighborhood? The people in Memphis, and I'm going to emphasize the process here of being one chaotic but smart. One of the things that to me is intoxicating about Memphis, one of the reasons I'm so enamored with them and what they do, is that in many ways they're very desperate. They're very poor and they're very desperate. But the desperation and the poverty, when it's allowed to react to it, is just the most brilliant style of development you will ever see. These people know how to hack things, make them work, and make them work brilliantly. I am continually amazed by the stuff that I see come out of the city of Memphis, Broad Avenue being one of them. The thing about Broad Avenue, and the thing about this chaotic but smart process, is it actually harkens back to the way that humans have built their cities literally for thousands and thousands of years. When we look back and we study human settlement, we can go around the world to different continents, different cultures, different latitudes, and what we see is that humans built their habitat in ways that were very, very similar. The development styles might look a little bit different, the architecture might be a little bit different, but the assembly methods were very similar. Cities would start with a little collection of pop-up shacks. They could have been made of adobe, they could have been made like these of wood, they could have been made of whatever materials were around. The idea was you just get started with a little bet, a small little investment. This is my hometown, Brainerd, Minnesota, back in 1870. This is the first iteration of my city. A little collection of pop-up shacks, some hopes and some dreams about the future. If we went back to the original layout and design of Shreveport, the very first iteration of this city, I guarantee you, looked like that. The very first iteration of Manhattan looked like that. of Houston, of Dallas, of New Orleans looked exactly like that. Some people with a few dreams about the future, they created what they could with what they had, and they looked forward to better days. We built thousands of these across North America, just like this. And for a variety of complex reasons, reasons that defy our ability to predict or project or even to fully understand after the fact, a lot of these places failed. They never got beyond this phase. What happens when a place like this fails? Does the stock market crash? Does unemployment skyrocket? Do we have to have an emergency session of Congress to bail out banks? Of course not. We know what this is. These are little bets. The people here, they salvage what they can, they move on to the next place. We built thousands of these across this continent, and for a variety of complex reasons, reasons that defy our ability to predict or project or even to fully understand after the fact. A lot of these places were successful. And when they were successful, they would grow in a very simple way. They would grow incrementally up, incrementally out, and become incrementally more intense. More and more people would move to the place, building their own pop-up shacks. The energy of those people coming together would actually raise the underlying land values. As the underlying land values increase, there's a natural redevelopment pressure on these properties. And in the course of 30 years, in my hometown, this little street of pop-up shacks would become a street with 2- and 3-story wood structures. This is the exact same street 30 years later. And after another generation of incrementally growing up, you didn't get it. Incrementally growing out and incrementally becoming more intense, these 2- and 3-story wood buildings would ultimately grow to be buildings like this, buildings of brick and granite. The way cities have built wealth historically is incrementally. Small investments over a broad area over a long period of time. The way cities have provided opportunity for people to start with nothing and end with something is by having a development pattern that grew incrementally over a broad area over a long period of time. This is a development pattern, essentially a way of assembling human habitat that was tested and refined and honed by us, humans, around the world for thousands and thousands and thousands of years. This is how we build our habitat. If you think of bees building a beehive, we intuitively grasp and understand that the bees and the beehive are in a sense co-evolved. They work together. The beehive is actually designed and organized to harmonize the bees. And we grasp, we understand that if you took a beehive and said, you know what, I think we could do better. These bees seem a little bit, out of sorts. Let's build a bee cul-de-sac and a bee frontage road, and we'll put the honey part over here, and the queen, she can be off on her own in this, subdivision. We kind of understand that what we would get would be neurotic bees, right? Like the bees are designed to live in a certain habitat that co-evolved with them. This is much like our habitat is co-evolved with us. And we have kind of casually, as our post-World War II development pattern ramped up, we've kind of casually disregarded many of those really ancient wisdoms that were passed on to us. In the book and in my talks, I tend to focus on the financial ramifications of this. I'm going to give you a couple examples now to kind of drive home some of the financial trade-offs in our post-war development model. This again is my hometown. These are 2 identical blocks. If you look at them, my office is right across the street here. My house is actually in the neighborhood just to the west. These 2 identical blocks were built in the 1920s. In the 1920s, this would have been the far edge of town. And so what you had in the 1920s was a development pattern that looked like the block on the left, looked like this here. A series of pop-up shacks on the far edge of town. And had things continued as they had for thousands of years, what would we have expected? Over time, those pop-up shacks would be redeveloped, torn down. You would have gotten buildings with 2nd and 3rd stories, stuff that was more intense, more ornate. Of course, that's not what happened. When these were built in the 1920s and the people had hopes and dreams about the future, then we had the Great Depression. We had World War II, and now we have a brand new development pattern, one that was kind of pioneered in Detroit and areas around Detroit, and then standardized and nationalized and pumped out to us as part of a national growth strategy after World War II. And so what happened is that instead of incrementally building these blocks, we just skipped right over them and started building out on the edge. And my city grew out and out and out and out. I like to point out, at the end of World War II, my little town was 13,500 people. Today, my little town is 13,500 people. We're 10 times the size in area. Okay? Think about that for a second. The wealth of 10,500 people now must sustain the roads, the sidewalks, the curb, the drainage systems, the pipes, the pumps, the valves, the meters, the police protection, the fire protection, the garbage pickup of an area 10 times what our ancestors did. That is an enormous financial burden. What happened to neighborhoods like these is they just stagnated. As people stopped moving to these neighborhoods because there were new opportunities we were subsidizing out on the edge, the development in this neighborhood stagnated and declined. The property values stopped rising, and when the underlying land values stop rising, that redevelopment potential goes away. And so now these properties sit and stagnate and go blighted. That's what happened to these 3 blocks. 2 blocks over, the city labeled it as blight. We were able to get it torn down, and now we have the new Taco John's drive-thru. I found out that you do not have Taco John's in Louisiana. That's a shame. Taco John's you can think of as like Norwegian Mexican food. It's the finest Mexican cuisine you will get. Yeah. Yeah, no, it's incredible. We have, you're going to get mild or extra mild cheddar cheese. Ketchup is a spice at Taco John's. Yeah. So if you ever get a chance, try it. It's fantastic stuff. We've got a brand new one. This development met all the building codes and zoning codes. We got rid of a block of blight. We've now got something shiny and new. It meets all the parking requirements. It meets the sign ordinance. It's got the right floor area ratio. It's got sprinkler systems and ADA bathrooms. Everything is nice and clean and perfect about this. Everybody was thrilled about this. We got rid of blight. We got something new. How wonderful. Here's what nobody bothered to look at. That old blighted rundown block has a total value of $1.1 million. That shiny and new block, which is the same size, the same area, has the same amount of public infrastructure, essentially the same cost to us as a community to provide ongoing service and maintenance to, the total value is only $600,000. Understand what you're looking at. You're looking at the traditional pattern of development, the way we built cities for thousands of years around the world. You're looking at it in its incremental first phase after almost a century of decline and neglect. And it still outperforms by a wide, wide margin the stuff we're building brand new today. It's not even close. For those of you, I'm going to localize this a little bit. I didn't bring my Allendale Strong t-shirt, which I did order and I do have. My wife said it doesn't look good on me. She said it's the colors, but I like it anyway. When I go out to a neighborhood like that and I'm like, look at the wealth and the potential and look at how great this neighborhood is. Sometimes people think I'm crazy. They're like, what are you talking about? What are you talking about? I don't see it. These properties look blighted. They look run down. I'm like, no, you haven't done the math. You haven't looked at the underlying math. These neighborhoods are full of not only wealth and high returning for the community, but amazing, amazing potential. I'm going to go back to Memphis again, just real briefly. For those of you familiar with South Memphis is one of the poorest neighborhoods in Memphis. When I was there the first time, I met with A.C. Wharton, the mayor of Memphis, who I think he might have been from South Memphis, but whether he was or not, he had a deep passion for that neighborhood and wanted to make sure that the needs and demands of that neighborhood were given higher priority than they had been. Just for those of you that don't know South Memphis, I'll give you a sense of the poverty there. It is a viable business model if you live in South Memphis and own a car, which was most people did not, but if you did, to drive that car to the Walmart, fill up the trunk with daily essentials, toothpaste, toilet paper, that kind of thing, drive back and sell that out the back of your car to people. Because there was no place to get that stuff in the neighborhood. There was no place that you could purchase things like that. And so this was a very, very poor neighborhood. And what we did is we put together a map and we showed in Memphis where were the neighborhoods that were producing the highest amount of wealth, the highest amount of financial productivity. What are the neighborhoods that provided the greatest value per acre? And we laid this out for Mayor Wharton and we showed him. Number one neighborhood, South Memphis. Some of the lowest performing ones were the ones out on the edge, where the city had been subsidizing and running sewer and water and trying to get new development out there. The people who would build the big houses, they were doing all the annual annexations to try to bring new property in the city and get homes that were going to be 300,000, 400,000, 500,000. The theory was if we can just bring enough of those in, they'll create enough wealth and money where we can go back in and take care of South Memphis. And that was actually the strategy. And the mayor, who cared deeply about South Memphis, had bought into that strategy until we showed him the math. And the reality was, in Memphis, as it is in my city, that South Memphis and the poorer neighborhoods in my community are actually subsidizing that stuff out on the edge. It's the opposite of what they thought was happening. This brings me to my second map, or my second example, which I'm going to show you, which is actually a map we put together for the city of Lafayette. I know I say it Lafayette because I grew up reading about the American Revolution and I'm from Minnesota. They have some weird way of saying it that I hear people here also say, Lafayette or something like that. I'm like, what is that? That's a different city. So I apologize. I can try to say Lafayette, but I'll forget and then I'll sound dumb. At least to myself. So I'm going to continue to say it my way. But you know what city I'm talking about, the one south of you. So I was invited as part of a team with a group called Urban 3 out of Asheville to go to the city and help them understand why they were perpetually broke. I saw the recent news report on your sewer system and how basically you've now discovered that your sewer system is going to cost you vastly more money than you ever imagined, as if somehow magically all this pipe just appeared in the ground. These are actually easy numbers to calculate if you sit down and calculate them. Nobody has for a long time, and that's why these numbers kind of come up and bite you and shock you. Nonetheless, in Lafayette, Louisiana, they had, and I think the burning issue there is they had a backlog of road maintenance that was somewhere around $60 million. And their annual budget for road maintenance was something like $3 million. And they sat down and they said, we could increase our budget by double, and basically we'll still be falling behind every year, adding more and more to this backlog. How is this possible? Because Lafayette, Louisiana has experienced lots of growth. They've been out annexing property. They've been out doing big projects. They've been out subsidizing this growth. How is it that we find ourselves in a position where we can't even maintain our basic core critical infrastructure? How is this possible? And so what we did is we went in Lafayette and we looked at every single expense that the city experienced. We interviewed all the departments. We went through all their records. This took a year to do, by the way. We went there 4 times for a week each time, worked on the data in between visits. So we documented, here's where all your streets are, and here's the ongoing expense. Here's where your sewer system is, and your ongoing expense, your water system. Here's your parks, and your transit, and your police protection. And we mapped these all out. We had dozens of maps showing where all these costs were. We then looked at all the revenue sources the city had. Here's where your property tax are coming from. Here's where your sales tax is coming from. Here's your utility fees. We had a bunch of different maps. And at the end of this project, we mashed all these maps together and we said, here is your profit and loss statement for the city of Lafayette. Here it is in a map format. Every year, here's the properties that are generating more revenue for you than they cost to provide service. And here are the properties that provide more to provide ongoing service and maintenance than they're generating in revenue. That's what this map is here. Everywhere where you see blue, from the city's standpoint, this is essentially a property that is profitable. Everywhere where you see red is, from the city's standpoint, again, a property that is cash flow negative. Just so we're working with the big numbers here. The median family in Lafayette, Louisiana, so the median, meaning half the families pay more, half the families pay less. The median family pays $1,500 a year in taxes to the city. In order for the city to maintain everything that they have built, in order for them to take care of every road, every pipe, every neighborhood, provide all the services that they promised, median family taxes, we need to go from $1,500 a year to $9,200 a year. 1 out of every $5 the median family makes, we need to get sent back to the city just to take care of what they've already built. That's the ramification of this development pattern that the city has adopted. Let's go through this map real quick and show you what's going on here. There's a blue area here in the middle. Blue, remember, is profitable. That is Lafayette, Louisiana's core downtown. I'm guessing that many of you have been there. I'm guessing many of you didn't go down there and start snapping photos and taking pictures of yourself for selfies. I think they're trying. It's getting better. No one says, I want to go on vacation and experience it all in downtown Lafayette. It's not exactly downtown Disney, right? They're working at it. There's a lot of good things going on. But from the eye candy test, not the best neighborhood. Financially, it's absolutely killing it. It's doing wonderful. You can see it's the most profitable place in the entire city. There's a crescent of blue. I'm going to start with my thing up here. The crescent runs through here. Those, again, are the neighborhoods that pay annually more in taxes and fees than they require in ongoing services. Those are the poorest neighborhoods in the community. Those are the shotgun shacks. Those are the places where you walk through and you're like, wow, this neighborhood's really struggling. Again, the eye test, they don't look very successful. When we were going there and going to get an Airbnb for a week, the city staff said, stay out of that neighborhood, like don't go there. Yet when we run the math and we look at the numbers, most profitable neighborhoods in the city. All this red stuff, out here on the edge, out here on the edge, up here, those are the malls, the big box stores, the strip malls, the franchise restaurants, the windy, curvy streets, the cul-de-sac-y places, the 3-car garage with the attached house. All that stuff is out there in that red. I go into this in detail in the book. Let me try to explain it in a tweet, what's going on. When you grow as a city horizontally, when you annex new property, when you bring new things into the city, when a developer comes in and says, I'll spend this much money building something new, when the federal government gives you a grant to build a new highway or frontage road, or the state government comes in and helps you extend sewer and water. What we're really, really good at in this post-war economy is new growth. And new growth benefits everybody. The federal government sees GDP go up. The state sees their tax receipts go up. The city gets permit fees and new taxes. Growth benefits everybody when it happens. It's like a sugar high. The problem is the federal government, the state government, doesn't take on the long-term liability of providing police and fire protection, of picking up all that garbage. They don't have the long-term liability of fixing the sewer and the water system when they go bad, of maintaining all those roads, of picking up all the kids who've got to ride the school bus. We have that at the local level. The catch is that the bill doesn't come due for a generation. That road doesn't fall apart for 20 or 25 years. That sewer pipe isn't going to go bad for 30 or 40 years. Those bills are way out there in the future. And so for 2 decades, 3 decades, we get to enjoy a financial sugar high at the local level. But there's a liability sitting out there in the future for somebody else. The problem is that we live in the future of people who were in the past. When you get this newspaper article that says you have a fraction of what you need to maintain your sewer system, and everybody goes, wow, that sounds really bad. It is really bad. It was easily foreseeable. If anyone had asked the question 40 years ago, they didn't. And they didn't, and we can look back and blame them and shake our fists at them and be angry at them until we look at the agenda of our council meeting and see that we're also not asking the questions, and we're doing the same exact thing today. So this is a very human failing that we see in Shreveport, we see in Memphis, we see in Brainerd, we see everywhere, because we are all human. We all suffer from this same human failing. Psychologists actually have a word for this. It's called temporal discounting or cognitive discounting. It's why people smoke. It's why, you'll go home and sit on the couch and watch a sporting event and eat a bowl of ice cream instead of going for a walk or exercising, right? I'm not going to get heart disease. I'm not going to get lung cancer. I'm not going to get, and then, oops, wish I could redo the last 40 years. That's human. We all share this. This is what it looks like when it's given a huge budget at the city level. This is what it looks like. How do we get out of this? Or how do we, I think get out of this is the wrong term. How do we start to address this? And this is where I want to talk a little bit of finance with you and have you think strategically about how we make public investments. Because we started this whole conversation with, we got money from the state, we're going to run sewer and water out to the edge of town. Isn't this going to be great for everybody? How do we think more strategically than that? What I'm going to have you think about is looking at the city as a banker would look at it, and then looking at it as a venture capitalist would look at it. They're 2 different mindsets. What is a banker mindset? A banker mindset is one of very essentially low risk with steady returns. Bankers are inherently, and don't think of like Wall Street bankers who are gambling with your money. I'm talking about like your local banker who actually can't gamble with your money. They are inherently conservative people. Local banking is a very, very conservative undertaking. There's a saying in the local banking business that they follow the 3-6-3 model. You borrow money at 3%, you loan it out at 6%, and then you get out on the golf course by 3 p.m. It's a very boring business model. And anybody who has gone in and tried to get a loan when they desperately needed one knows that bankers do not take risks. You can only get a loan if you really don't need it. Okay? That's because banking is ultimately a very conservative type of approach. We do not want to lose any money, period. This is very different than a venture capitalist. Very, very different than a venture capitalist. Venture capitalists are willing to take high risks because they're not looking for steady gains, they're looking for huge gains. They're looking for moonshot kind of gains. A venture capitalist will say, I'm going to go out and I'm going to take 10 companies that I think have a huge upside potential. And I'm going to invest a little bit in each of those companies. Now, I've got a big nest egg I'm going to keep over here, but the money I can afford to lose, I'm going to invest in 10 different companies. And I know when I do this that of the 10, 2 or 3 of them are just going to flame out and fail. They're going to be complete losers. Another maybe 3 or 4 of them will make a little bit of money, but not really enough to justify the level of risk that I'm taking here. But 1 or 2, or if I'm really lucky, 3 of these companies are going to go crazy. They're going to turn $1 into 1,000, and I'm going to be filthy rich. Not because I'm a genius, because I didn't pick the 3, but because I was strategic. I picked a portfolio of 10, hoping I would land 1 or 2 or maybe 3 of these. I don't know from day one which 3 of the 10 are going to work. I just know that some of them will. That's a venture capital mentality. Many of us have savings. And many of us, through our employer or what have you, have retirement savings. And if you've ever gone and set up one of these retirement accounts or some type of brokerage account, they'll walk you through a process to help you gauge your level, your comfort level with risk, right? You go through the questions and they'll ask you a series of questions, and the correct answer is always medium. Do you want to put all your money into biogenetic tech stocks, or would you rather invest in money market? Medium. Do you want to take your money to the casino, or would you rather bury it in the backyard? Medium. And medium feels right for us, right? It feels very human. I'm not a prude. I'm not going to bury my money in the backyard. I want to get some type of return, but I'm not going to gamble and take a big risk, so I'm not going to put it in something that could flame out. I want something that is medium. Here's the thing. On Wall Street, you are known as the sucker at the card table. The medium portfolio is the portfolio for losers. And I'm not saying that as myself. I'm saying that that's what the people on Wall Street call you. Losers. If you are a strategic investor, you don't go for medium. What you do is you split your allocation between a banker mentality and a venture capital mentality. Understand what you've done when you do this. And I'm going to put some numbers up here of what I would recommend for a city. If you put 95% of your money into a banker mentality, what you are saying is that the most I will ever lose in my portfolio is 5%. The most that I will ever go down is 5%. I will not tolerate losses greater than that. And in fact, on the 5%, because it's steady returns, I'm just going to have a nice steady grind off that 5%. That's the most I'm going to lose. But I'm going to take my 5%, my other part of the barbell here, the other end, the high risk end of the strategy, and I'm going to put that as a venture capitalist. And if all of those lose, I lose 5%. But if a couple of them do really well, I can double, triple, quadruple my portfolio overnight. Do you see what we've done here? We've given ourselves the maximum upside potential with the minimum amount of downside risk. This is a really strategic development portfolio. All right, let's apply this now to a city. I want you to think first like a banker. We're going to back up. We're going to go back to Lafayette, Louisiana. If you are a banker and you're going to invest 90% of your public portfolio, your capital improvements projects, the money you're going to spend year after year after year, if you're going to invest that like a banker in the city of Lafayette, where do those investments go? The blue areas. And what do those investments look like? They look like basic maintenance. Go out there and fix the sidewalk. Go out there and pull the weeds. Keep the street lights on. Take care of the cracks. Fix the streets. Make sure people can get around. Basic maintenance. That's what it looks like. It's not glamorous. It's not glitzy. It's not going to win you some award from some, American Planning Association magazine. It's just taking care of business. That's what it looks like. And look at these neighborhoods now. They all suffer from decline and neglect. Imagine what they would be like if we just gave them a base level of love and respect. What would that be like? It would be amazing, amazing. These are places that are subsidizing and generating wealth for the entire community. If we're going to think strategically like bankers, we're going out and we're just taking care of them. And again, to localize it here, Allendale should never suffer from lack of basic maintenance on the public side. Never. Never. Neither should your core downtown. All right. Where are your venture capital investments? This is what I'm going to walk you through now. I'm going to walk you through it for my community, but I think you're going to see some parallels for where you're at. When I first published that thing about the Taco Johns, the old and blighted block versus the shiny and new, I live in a small town. People got really angry with me. Understand, my cousin runs the local economic development authority that got this project in. I have another cousin who is a manager at the Taco John's. Yeah, so family reunions are very awkward, exactly, yeah. And the pushback that I got is, Chuck, if you're so smart, what would you have done? Taco John's comes in, they want the whole block, they're willing to build. If you were so smart, what would you have done? Would you have said no to Taco John's? And the reality is I would have said no to Taco John's, but I would be like 1 out of 1,000 people who would have said no to Taco John's. The broad community consensus was this was an improvement. And so the question that I struggled with is, what would I have done? And it took me a long time to reject the premise of the question, because the premise of the question was, as this neighborhood cycles through increasing levels of decline and despair, what would you have done? And the reality is I reject the premise that these neighborhoods should go through cycles of decline and despair. And so a group of people in my community and I went out, and we spent a year in this neighborhood trying to identify things we could do to get the neighborhood moving in a different direction. We did things like we held a block party, we did a scavenger hunt, we had different things to get people out talking to each other, but mostly we wanted them to talk to us. We spent a lot of time just being in this neighborhood, walking with people, experiencing the neighborhood with them. Can I walk with you today? Yes. Well, talk to me about where you came from. Where are you going? What is this trip that you're on? Why is it necessary? Why are you doing it right now? Talk to me about how this street makes you feel. Are you scared here? Is this good? Like what we were trying to just understand the neighborhood from the perspective of the people who experienced it day after day after day. And after being out there for a year, we put together a report that we called Neighborhoods First that identified 8 things the city could do right now that we had prototyped and tested that they could go and do right now to make this neighborhood a little bit better. And the idea was, if we can signal to people that this neighborhood is going to get better and get better and get better, we can not only change the trajectory of decline, but we actually will get private capital off the sidelines. Because there's a lot of people who live in this neighborhood who, yes, they're very poor, but if you live in this neighborhood, why would you invest in your house? Why would you go out? I mean, unless you're Rosie, unless you're like this beautiful person who cares like deeply about a neighborhood, why would you go out and build a nice garden? Why would you maintain stuff? You know for a fact that next year your property is going to be worth less than it is this year because the city is completely neglecting this neighborhood. Why would you go out and make investments that are going to lose you money? Why? And so we said, if we can shift the trajectory of this, we can get all this wealth of capital, human capital, off the sidelines and put it to work making this neighborhood a better place. So here's our 8 projects. And I'm going to orient you with the neighborhood a little first before I zoom in. So here's the Taco John's down here. Here's the old and blighted block. There's my office down here. The neighborhood I live in is right up here. So this is Northeast Brainerd. This is the old mall. I say the old mall because we now have the new mall and then the big box strip. So the new big box strip. This is where, just for timing, this is where I sat on Santa's lap. There's no Santa there anymore. That was at the new mall. My kids sat on Santa's lap, and now today I don't know what they do. This is the old paper mill up here. This is a school right here that my mom went to, I went to, and my kids went to. And so these streets right here are kind of like the thoroughfares through the neighborhood. So let's zoom in on these. Project number 1, this is what the street looks like. This is the main east-west street through the neighborhood. And for some reason, the city has decided that every neighborhood needs an arterial street, so it needs a fast through lane through the middle of the street. If you look at the cross-section here, these are really 14-foot wide lanes. These are huge highway-scaled lanes. People speed through this neighborhood. They drive really, really fast. We went out and did a speed study, which we just took a radar gun that you can use, you know, to do how fast a baseball is being thrown. We got a hold of one of those and we went out and we found that 2 out of 3 cars went over the speed limit on this street. When we talked to people, they said we stay away from this street because of the fast traffic. I tell my kids not to go here. We don't walk here. We stay away. We stay off of the street because of how fast things are going. We went out in the middle of the night, and with chalk, we chalked in for a few block stretch narrower lanes. You see there's no pavement markings out here now. They don't maintain them. They've all gone away and nobody puts them back in. We went out with chalk and we chalked them in. And then we did another speed study. And what we found was that in the same 2-hour period that we had done the prior one, we just did it a week later, only one car out of nearly 300 went over the speed limit. Having that little bit of extra edge friction, a little bit more constrained driving surface, slowed speeds dramatically. And so our first recommended project is go out and just paint in some narrower lanes. Take paint and just paint in narrower lanes. That would make the street traffic slower, and it would make the neighborhood a lot more livable, make it easier for people to cross, safer for people to be in. You could give this extra space over to bikes. You don't have to. The most important thing is just narrow up the lanes. Perpendicular to this then is the north-south street. This is First Avenue. First Avenue, when I show this, people are like, wow, you got light rail. No, we have an abandoned rail spur. There's no icon for abandoned rail spur, so you get light rail. But basically, there's a line that runs through the middle of the street. They used to run out to our paper mill from the rail yard. Again, 16-foot driving lanes plus this extra space here. These are massive, massive lanes. Same kind of concept. Let's narrow up the lanes with paint. Let's create some edge friction. Here, though, because there's no sidewalks at all, we said let's create some human space out here on the edge, and let's try to get the cars to park out a little bit so that the cars actually can create kind of a safe area or like a buffer so people can walk on one side of the car and then drive on the other side of the car. So there's a little bit more spacing and things will feel a little bit safer and actually be a little bit safer. One of the things that we experienced was that most of the foot traffic was going to the grocery/pharmacy in the neighborhood where that old mall is. The old mall is now not a mall, but part of it is a grocery store on the end. And people, there's a grocery store right there. People would walk through here and cars coming along here, drivers would be going very, very fast through here. This was kind of a dangerous crossing. In front of the store is this cross-hatching in paint. The store's actually gone out and put this paint in, and it kind of denotes to people that, hey, people are going to be crossing here kind of random places. Again, we said, let's go do that thing here. Let's take that same concept that they've tested over there, seems to work. Let's just bring it here. We have people already who are crossing here. What we want to do is just alert people that, hey, there's people crossing, be on the lookout, be aware. Just south of here is another crossing. So there were really two where we saw like a flood of people coming through on foot. This one again was really, really dangerous. Cars were going very fast across here. This one didn't work well for the cross-hatching, but we did go out in the middle of the night and with duct tape we tested out a crosswalk. And we put orange flags on both sides. I realize some people don't like this. They're like, it's demeaning to have to carry an orange flag. I agree with you. It's also safer. And when we put in the orange flags, people said we appreciated them. We sat there and we walked across with them. We interviewed them. We talked to them. They said this really helps. It makes us feel safer. Makes us feel like we're seen more. We talked to some people in the vehicles and they said the same thing. We watched how people reacted and it seemed to be a big improvement. And so we recommended putting a crosswalk in here and then keeping those orange flags on the side. When we cross over that then, same street, but once you cross with the crosswalk, you get to this wide area. This is a commercial street, so we have a commercial street standard, which means you have to build it so wide. The assumption behind this is that there'll be parking on the side. Of course, then they also require huge parking lots, and so no one parks on the street. So what you wind up with is these two drag strips, and the traffic goes very, very fast down here. There's not much of it, but it's very fast. You can see the curve radius here is huge. So what happens is these small cars would come flying around the corner, and we actually saw people out there who were just walking, and all of a sudden a car would come flying around the corner, and they would jump into the snowbank to get off the roadway. What we said is, let's just take the top 10 feet and give it over to people walking. Let's just put a double white line in there. You still have massive amounts of space for vehicles. I mean, you still have like two 20-foot lanes. It's ridiculous. This is like 50 feet wide of pavement. let's give the northern 10 feet over to people walking. Let's just make that like a kind of a car-free zone and let that be their space and make it a little bit safer for them to traverse through this area. This is the park on the north side of town. This is what it looks like from the neighborhood looking north into the park. One of the things that we heard and one of the things that was kind of a neighborhood thing was that a lot of nefarious activity went on in this park. There was talk of people selling drugs and doing other things. The police department said, maybe we should go put some cameras out here, do some extra patrols. We said, let's just trim up these trees. Part of the natural kind of policing of a neighborhood is to be able to have eyes on the street. And people's houses in this neighborhood they were the older style, so they faced the street. They had openings up on the street. They had windows on the street. And so the way you police a neighborhood naturally like that is you have these things open onto the street and you just keep it clear of stuff. You maintain things so that people can see out there. And if people can see out there, people generally don't do nefarious activity there. So we said, let's just go out and trim up those trees. Once you get on the other side, this is what the park looks like. The park is very neglected, not well maintained. Outside of scheduled softball games, we never saw a kid in this park the entire year. This neighborhood's full of kids. The kids are all over. They go to the school usually and play in the playground there, but none of them would go to this park. We said, let's go plant some trees. This is a long-term project. We can't fix this park overnight, but the one thing we can get started now that will pay off decades from now is to get some trees started. Let's go plant some in this outfield and put a nice buffer into that failed industrial site. And let's go plant some shade trees where someday someone can sit back here and watch a softball game in the comfort of the shade. Our last project then was this neighborhood street here. One of the things we noticed about this street was that, and I'll say it this way, if this neighborhood is going to see a renaissance, where the properties become more valuable, the neighborhood becomes a better place to live, it's most likely to happen starting with this street. The houses along this street were kind of in the original traditional form. Other streets, a lot of them have been torn down, and then you get these apartment buildings that don't fit into the neighborhood or respect the neighborhood at all. This building retained a lot of the old architecture. The buildings opened onto the street. They faced the street. You can look at this street and see it's got good proportions. We had one streetcar in town that ran from the mill to the downtown. It actually went down this street. And so this street kind of kept the proportions of that investment. So you've got sidewalks, you've got boulevard with trees, and you've got a nice slow traffic driving lane with great architecture along it. The one thing that this street really lacks are street trees. In the late 1980s, we had Dutch elm disease come through and wipe out a whole bunch of trees. It's the city's policy not to plant trees, not to put trees in. The maintenance people don't like them. The public works people don't like them. Trees get in the way. We pointed out to people that trees create enormous amount of value. There's a study out of, and I'm going to insert a city's name here. Don't react to it. Let me talk you through it a little bit. There's a study out of Portland, Oregon, that says in Portland neighborhoods, every street tree you have raises the value of a property by $9,000. That's Portland. We're not Portland. We're a very different place. But even if it raises it by $900, which I think is probably a reasonable thing, the street tree costs much less than that. Let's go put them in. What we have found is that street trees are the highest returning financial investment that a city can make. When we put in a street tree, the amount of financial return we get based on compared to what we spend is enormous. And so we went out and counted 75 missing trees in this streetscape, and we said, let's go out and replant them. So here's our 8 projects. Let's go back to that original sewer and water expansion project. The city came up with their share. It's about $1.4 million. The state kicked in their portion. The city then, agreed to do the project. We got the money. We're going forward with it. What we found was that the groundwater conditions were terrible out here. The soil conditions were horrible, and we got a really bad contractor in our low bid environment. The final project cost, when we got all done with a year and a half of construction, a bunch of change orders, litigation, $13.5 million. Understand that the difference is all being paid for now by my neighbors, by the people who live in my community. That was the risk that we took on when we did this project. So the project's in. It's been in for a couple years now. There's been no new development, now that it's in, so to speak. But we do have this big bill that we're paying now every month because we had to take on a huge amount of debt to finish it off. Here's what our 8 projects cost. $16,700. What happens if we go out and in a venture capital mindset, we humbly observe where people struggle? We come up with small projects to incrementally address those struggles. And we go out in this neighborhood and we spend $16,700 trying to make the neighborhood a little bit better, trying to get private capital and energy off the sidelines, trying to get this neighborhood moving in a different direction. What happens if we spend $16,700 and nothing happens? Well, we're out $16,700. We have a $9 million budget. That's money we can afford to lose. And here's the great thing. We just learned 8 projects that didn't work. Let's go out next year and try 8 more. And 8 more after that, and 8 more after that. But I feel like we've got it right here. I feel like we're on the right track. Because we did go out and observe where people struggle. We did humble ourselves and say, we don't know the answer. Let's try things. Let's try to figure it out. We did prototype these things with our energy at very low dollar amounts. These are things we can do, not just in Northeast Brainerd, but in neighborhood after neighborhood after neighborhood, to try to move them incrementally to that next level of intensity. This is how we think like venture capitalists. This is how we make investments in our city that respond to the needs of people who are there, their needs today. This requires us to reorient ourselves. Instead of, as a city, looking at what the new developer can bring in, instead of looking at what new place we can annex, instead of looking at what's the big project we can get the state or the federal government to subsidize, what we are doing instead is shifting our gaze to intently focus on the real needs of people in our communities, where their struggles are, where their difficulties are. And by focusing on that, it feels a little bit, and we're in a church, it feels a little bit like church work, like social work. But I'm telling you, if we are just in it for the dollar, if that's all we care about, this is how you make great financial investments. This is how we build cities that are strong, financially, resilient, productive. This is essentially the traditional development pattern, that co-evolved way of building cities that people from around the world for thousands of years did. And this is why their cities endured. Jane Jacobs, who is revered by planners and rightly so, made this statement that I'm going to close with. Cities have the capability of providing something for everybody, only because and only when they are created by everybody. This is how we, together, through local governments, serve each other. And serve each other in a way that not only is going to be guaranteed to make people's lives better, but also improve our bottom line. And that is the essence of what a Strong Towns approach is all about. Thank you for having me here tonight. Oh, you don't.